without further ado, I'm going to introduce myself very briefly. I'm Brenda Tong. I'm the Deputy Executive Director at New Destiny, and my pronouns are she, her. And I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, name, title, affiliation, and pronouns, and then we'll get the show on the road. So I'm going to start on my far left.
Hi everyone, my name is Tanya. My pronouns are she and her. I am a member of New Destiny's Survivor Voices project. I am a survivor of domestic violence, and I received assistance from New Destiny with their housing program.
Hi everyone, I'm Shane Cox. I'm from Anthos Home. Sorry, he and his Chief Strategy Officer at Anthos Home.
Hi everyone, Sabrina Camp, pronouns she, her, hers, and I support her state policy and advocacy at Freedom. And if you're not familiar with our work, we create pathways to long-term safety for survivors of intimate partner violence, focusing on that nexus between intimate partner violence and violence.
Hi everybody, Mary Adams. I'm the Associate Executive Director for Mental Health at University Settlement. She, her, hers.
Thank you, everyone. So our third and last, and perhaps my biased opinion, best panel is about addressing the trauma. We've talked a lot about the different systems that need to align in order to develop solutions for homelessness and domestic violence. And we also talked about how to actually access the housing. And so this panel is tasked with doing is exploring, after you get somebody into a home, what do you do? It's not, we no longer operate under the assumption that everything is fine just because you've gotten into a home. There are many, as everyone has, multiple folks have said, there's many layers to the trauma, and working through it takes time and it takes intervention. So without further ado, I'm actually going to ask Tanya, what were some of the key support mechanisms that helped you find your footing?
So when I moved into my apartment, it was a few weeks before the pandemic started. So I was working, but then I was furloughed shortly after. But New Destiny Housing provided me with financial assistance, rental assistance for, I believe it was 9 months. And that really just lifted a huge weight off my shoulders. Because it was like a million things that when I left my previous home, I went to a domestic violence shelter, and I basically had 2 suitcases and 3 kids. So I had left everything behind. And then I spent like 6 months in the DV shelter, and then I went into another shelter. So when I did move in, I didn't really have much, so I needed to finish my apartment and get settled in. So then losing my job and the pandemic starting, it was just a lot. So that financial assistance, that rental assistance, just was like a huge relief. Not having to think about that, not having to worry about it, being able to focus on everything else.
Sabrina, as you mentioned, you're from, and which has been leading innovative work to not just address financial abuse, but ensure survivors can build wealth. I just want to take a pause there and acknowledge that it's not a dirty word to actually encourage and want survivors to thrive and to build wealth and stability. Our question is, what are your Freedom's guiding principles to achieve its mission?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We have a lot of pillars, a lot of principles, but first and foremost, we trust survivors at all costs. We build all of our programs around trusting survivors. We have a savings matching program that helps survivors build $500 in savings in 6 months. We aren't asking for receipts. We aren't asking for them to prove themselves through this process. And so we are creating our programs that survivors can show, can be part of our programs without constantly having to prove or justify their need or justify those programs. And then secondly, we have our Survivor Safety Fund, where we give unrestricted cash grants to survivors up to $250. Our most recent safety fund, we gave $730 to survivors in our network. And again, those are all trust-based programs. We know that there's some amazing programs out there, but sometimes the way that they are designed or implemented can re-traumatize. And especially for survivors who are being subjected or have been subjected to economic abuse, asking for receipts, asking to track, asking for bank statements can oftentimes mimic the economic abuse that they were subjected to. And so we are very conscious and thoughtful about every step of the way, from how we design the survey questions, to interacting with them, to collecting data. Every piece of it is thought out with survivors in mind. And then secondly, we are survivor informed and survivor centered. We are a team of survivors. We rely on each other, the survivors in our network, to really guide our work. So for example, for our safety fund, we initially were doing $250, and then survivors were saying to us, we actually need more money than that. And so we listened and switched to increasing that number. And so, that's sort of part of how we continue to lead the work and innovate. And again, all trusting survivors, believing them, and then also making sure that we are survivor informed. And then lastly is flexibility. Survivor situations can change within an hour, or within a day or two, or anything like that. And so we, as a team, try to remain as flexible as possible. And then we are constantly learning from survivors, learning from each other, learning from other organizations who are doing innovative work, and thinking, how can we continue to improve, expand, reiterate, that sort of thing. We are not afraid of trying new ideas or thinking through new ideas. And I think that those three things combined has really helped us to lead the work in this way.
Thanks, Serena. I think one of the reoccurring themes throughout the symposium is the need to, one, trust survivors, but also to develop trust with different partners to facilitate a better partnership. Would anyone on this panel like to speak more about what that looks like in your program, or what it has meant for you personally?
I can certainly speak to that. But if I may, I think I just, again, wanted to reiterate what you're saying, and I think it's something that's not always acknowledged or recognized, but while housing is absolutely essential to healing and health and growth and stability, and is inherently restorative, it is really just the first step. The first step of a long, possibly windy, possibly very difficult process that is going to not be linear process. There's going to be lots of growth and lots of setbacks. And any program that's thinking about the long term needs to be designed to be able to help clients through that process. It should be guiding clients for long-term success, not just housing. And I can speak to a little bit, I guess, what that looks like. And so, coming from DHS, there's certainly some lessons we had learned. I was in the Street Homeless Solutions side, which is separate and apart from the shelters, operated pretty non-traditionally, given the population, the unique set of needs we were dealing with, which is not unlike the population many of you were dealing with, which are clients in crisis, dealing with very acute situations, multiple factors of which homelessness is just one. And the key lesson that we really learned was that you have to have this aftercare. Aftercare has to be an essential component of the work. And there's many forms it can take, and I will reiterate and belabor, as everybody else, that flexibility. It needs to be responsive to the needs of the clients, but also, and I can certainly get more into this, to landlords, who play a very big role in the process, the housing process, and helping them manage the transition as well, helping them address issues. And I can certainly go more into that here.
Yeah, I think, Shane, that's a great segue to your work at Anthos and the program design that you have developed over the course of the past year.
So in Anthos Home, so we are a very new organization. We just started, and we really started operations in the spring, into summer, into fall, and you all know how that goes, theory to practice. But Anthos, the kind of main goal is to transform the system which connects people with vouchers to housing. The idea is to not only house more people, to do it in such a way that we bring in more housing into the mix. That is kind of the key thing. We adapted the program from an organization called Brilliant Corners in California, and we've kind of taken a couple key components. One of them is, again, the word flexible funding. We're able to pool money, government money, private money, into a fund or pool that we can use flexibly. We can use in different ways to meet the unique needs of clients. So how this plays out, a couple of key components are we're able to bank units, which means we have a team of clients, a team of staff who are out there looking for units. When they find a unit that's going to, it's a quality unit that's going to meet the, it's going to pass inspection for the city, we can enter into a contract with that landlord, bring them into the program. And what that means is we are able to begin paying them essentially an amount that's equal to rent. And we can bank these units. So we're essentially asking that landlord to reserve that unit. Then we have clients, and then we're able to make a match to this pool of units. We can talk to clients about where they want to be, what are their needs, what are the preferences, what kind of accommodations do they need, and then we can match them to the units. And the landlords obviously have some freedom. They can interview clients. There can be an application process. We are there every step of the way with the client, helping them with profiles, applications, prep meetings. But the landlords are able to interview, 1 or 2 or 3, not 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then once we've matched the client, we also stay with the client for at least a year. But again, flexible, it can be more. And when we stay with clients, we're meeting with them at least, in-person visits at least quarterly. But again, if it needs to be more, it will be more. I'll be making contact with them via the phone, other ways, at least once a month after the move in. A key part of that also, though, is that aftercare really begins at preparation. So this whole time, while we're working with the clients through this process, we're there to walk through the leases, walk through the obligations that they have with the landlords, walk through what the recertification process is going to be, walk through utilities. We're there on the day that they move in, helping them through this process. We're giving them resource guides so they can get acclimated to the neighborhood. So essentially being a resource for that client to help manage the transition. But just real quickly, one key component of our work is we break the program up into 2. So we have what I call tenant coordinators. They're kind of the traditional case managers who are working with the clients. Certainly oriented in a kind of clinical way, they're social workers. But then we also have another set of program called housing acquisition. They're working with the landlords. You can almost think of them as case managers for the landlords. And again, that is really to say to the landlords, look, you do not have to be the social worker. We are not going to just place and run. We are going to be there with you. If you have an issue, if the city's payments are late, if you're having an argument with the client, if there's some other inspection bill, if something happens, you call us. We will help manage that process, help you through that process. So it does not get to eviction, it does not lead to detention, and it does not set back that permanency. Permanency support is kind of the goal for long-term success.
Thanks, Shane. I think New Destiny's EHV Aftercare program shares a lot of similarities, and I think that's one lessons learned for all of us who have been in this housing work. So part of the aftercare program that New Destiny developed also included timely access to affordable, culturally specific mental health care, which is some of us who have been looking for therapists we've discovered that it's not really quite that easy to access these days, or possibly ever. Mary, would you share an overview of the program that we collaborated on and tell us more about lessons learned and what, from the provider side, what the experiences were?
Well, I think it's what Shane said, that prior to our historical sense of housing, getting housing is just the first step. It's when you close that door behind you that you can take a deep breath, that mental health can work its way into a primary need from a secondary one that we had to put aside. When we were approached by New Destiny, we were really excited at the university because we have developed our mental health programs from the community, based on community need. So we've never seen a person coming from mental health needing one service. We've seen them as the whole person, and that's been another theme in the talk about today. Our partnership started out, I think, bringing a lot of wisdom to the table from Destiny and from our providers at University Settlements. The first thing we really talked about is How would we get people that have perhaps never pursued mental health services, A, not having access to resources, maybe stigma, cultural stigma, language, how do we get them to come to us? So there's a lot of front-end planning with New Destiny and University at the table. What would it look like? And of course, we decided that it would be New Destiny that had the trusting relationships that would do that warm handoff and make that happen. And then we started talking about what should our intake packets look like. Do they need to repeat their story over and over? Or does New Destiny know enough to say, this person had a really, really terrible incident that involved gun violence. They don't necessarily need to bring that to the table and be re-traumatized by having to tell their story, but we can do the warm handoff and we can begin working with that, with the knowledge without them having to repeat their story. So we put together a transfer, all of us working and planning together, and this was to break down barriers and to break down and push through stigma. I think that throughout we had ongoing meetings once we started this relationship to see what's working and what isn't and be proactive and say, you know what, that's not really working. Making sure that we were matching clients with right fit therapists, whether with a language or a cultural capacity. Somebody may prefer a specific gender. And then we also had a jump the wait list. So what Brenda was just mentioning is it's really difficult to find mental health services and then not have to wait 6 months for them. So, you know, we could leverage our mental health services because we can bill insurance, we can bill Medicaid, we have capacity. But we also could create a relationship where clients that needed mental health services and requested them could enter services right away. So we had a streamlined referral process. Another critical element for somebody that is struggling, really things may be falling apart now that they're safe in housing. How do we get them into services right away and then make sure that there's ongoing follow-up with whatever those services need to look like?
I also just want to make a plug for university in that in the partnership, one of the reasons why, a couple of the reasons why it was particularly successful was because the telehealth option really allowed families to, or the survivor to actually seek services that was most convenient, flexible time, in a language that they spoke. And I also think that was what was particularly helpful too, was university's ability to also serve the children in the household when need was uncovered. But I do want to circle back to the theme that we have about trust. And we're working with a population often where trust has been eroded or destroyed by the abuser, by the systems that they have been interfacing with. So I actually wanted to ask Tanya directly, what occurred that made you feel like you could trust New Destiny or the other staff that you worked with?
Before receiving any kind of services from New Destiny, it was like, it was day in, day out looking for apartments. They gave me a voucher, and I was trying to use this voucher. It was pretty much impossible. And then when I was connected with New Destiny, I truly feel like you guys were my lifeline. And the whole process, constantly checking in on me. And I'm the type, I would send emails, checking in. I would get responses I just felt like I was genuinely cared for. I felt like the person I was working with genuinely just wanted to see me move into my new apartment. And I guess, it was just, I finally felt like, okay, this is it. Yeah.
Sabrina, going back to your work and trusting your clients and listening to their voice, does it ever happen where the clients are kind of like, are you really going to give me $500?
All the time.
Yeah. Can you tell us how you work with that and help them overcome feeling like this can't be real?
I think we act really quick, and so survivors are getting their funding as like within days of filling out the application. So the way that we do our safety fund, the only required question besides basic contact information is, are you a survivor, yes or no? They are self-assessing, and then they say yes, okay, then they move on through the process. In addition to that, we ask them what's the safest way to get them their money. We don't just say it's a check or a gift card. And so giving them some options in how they can receive the money. And then we also have some additional optional questions if you're wanting to get some more information about the impact of economic abuse or impact of forced debt or anything like that, and those are all optional. And we are constantly following up with survivors, and I think we are as quick as we really can be. We process payments really quickly. If there's a delay, we let them know. And we are sort of, again, making sure that they hear from us and that we are as responsive as we can be to any, even if it's just an inquiry, we respond. Even if it's, an email, it's like, thank you so much for this money. Is this real? Like, yes, it's real. You can expect a payment within however many days. And so, again, it's continuing to show up for survivors in ways that they may not have seen before or may not be able to trust. And so we, it's a full team effort when we do our safety funds because we are so intentional about continuing to build that trust. And yeah.
Thank you for that. Moving along from trust, needing to develop trust amongst all parties, I actually wanted to circle back to aftercare. And this is open to all of the panelists, but specifically Shane or Mary. We talk about when we say how many people were placed, how many units are built, but how would you measure the success of aftercare?
Yeah, I should note, I think it's hard. I mean, there's not a lot of agreement that is necessary for all clients. I think number one, obviously, I think we should all think about is shelter reentry or eviction. Obviously, those are like key indicators. But, we're talking about long-term progress, growth, and healing, and health, and these are a lot harder to put our arms around. I think just avoiding housing court in general, not even waiting for eviction. There shouldn't be any cases filed. That's certainly an indicator. Recertification, as everybody's seen in the news, has become a significant issue. Making sure that recertifications are filed. Obviously, there's sometimes it's a problem with HRA, just the general ability to process them, but just an indication also of whether or not somebody was there to support the clients, help them navigate through this complicated, burdensome, difficult process that they could be in. So recertification and connection to care is a really important thing. I think there's a certain healthcare component that we should all keep in mind, and obviously I know everybody wants to bring down emergency costs, but those are very long-term things, but I think the ability to connect people to care in their neighborhood. And then also just when we're talking about trust, is respecting the clients, the family's autonomy and independence, and figure out what do they need, what do they want for there, and then seeing how far you can help them along that process. Do they want, is it job training? Is it getting their children connected to to be consistently in school or whatever, or connected to X, Y, and Z service, or those things that we can help them fulfill in the long term. So I think those are ways of measuring it. Certainly.
So I agree, and I would add on changing our view or our lens to really expect problems. So that when people move in to housing after so much trauma and the density of their experiences, our community of providers and the world overall should expect there to be problems. That children will start exhibiting behaviors that might be indicative of depression or behavioral things. This should not be a surprise, and we should be proactively creating programs and services that respond to those needs. And when we talk about cost saving, this is where it becomes attractive, is that we've put somebody in housing, we've put a lot of money into that. Now let's talk about doing all of the wraparound preventive services that we can put in place to strengthen that family on the front end so that those children will grow up and be healthy and contributing members to the world. And then they won't have a need to be rehoused. We do want to, we may have to step in for crisis, which is expensive, but not for the end of time. So this is reframing this and saying, okay, great, now we're going to have a few years of front end, heavier services, and then we should be breaking the cycle.
Thank you. I think I want to take another pause there and just flag a statistic that never fails to both amaze and horrify me, which is 16% of adults in the DHS shelter system experience shelter as children. And so I think it speaks to why aftercare is so critical, so that we are breaking these cycles and that we're also building a pathway outside of repeating this experience generation after generation. So I want to pivot there and think through, we've been talking about like the aftercare component, but I would like to focus a little more about what actually quite a few of the panels have talked about, which is the impact that homelessness and domestic violence has on health. I think it's well documented that PTSD, anxiety, and depression is a frequently occurring mental health issues that survivors experience. So I actually wanted to ask the panelists to think about and maybe suggest what should healthcare be doing about this issue, this dual issue.
Speak to it very quickly. I think there need to be changes in what can be built, what we can build for. I think there need to be some kind of lots of cost-effective strategies and interventions need to be moved farther upstream, and I think what that means is paying for things that have not traditionally been seen as medical services: housing, food, transportation, utilities, all of the things we're talking about up here. I think need to be part, just like aftercare, I think needs to be part of the voucher. It needs to come with services. These are very intensive services. Our aftercare is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as of most people. These are very resource intensive, and understanding that there's going to be some upfront costs to some things that are not traditionally medical, but in the long run, they're going to be cost effective and have lots of implications for the family, for the long term, and breaking the cycle.
Tanya, you look like you want to say something.
Sorry, I'm losing my voice. When I was in the shelter and I was looking for my apartment, I did receive counseling. I had children receive counseling, and I feel like that was very important. We had obviously left a very traumatic experience behind, and there was a lot to unpack. And when I did move in, I continued that therapy, and I continued that for my children. And like again, it's I think I spent pretty much a year of my life in limbo. I feel like my life was almost on pause, living in survival mode. So when I did move in, it was like, yes, it felt great, but then it was like restarting for me and my kids, and creating new memories for them, and
I think I often hear from survivors that it is that they can breathe afterwards. I think that is something that is well serves to remind us about why we do what we do. One last point, I know we're running short on time, but we have been talking about a lot of things that are post-crisis and talking about systems change. But I do want to ask Serena, since the idea of economic prosperity seems to be such a struggle for some folks to embrace, what has Freefrom done to change the narrative from crisis response to systemic change nationally?
Yeah, thank you. Where do I start? I think we are trying to build a full ecosystem of support for survivors. Like, what does that mean? It means that no matter what your need is, and no matter what a survivor needs, if they have choice and services, programs, etc., we know that one size does not fit all, and so that sort of embodies our approach to systems change and narrative change. We aren't just only doing policy advocacy work, we're doing a ton of other things. First and foremost, we start within. We are a team of survivors. We know that folks on our team may have challenges, been subjected to economic abuse. We know that they may need safety. We know that they need the same things that we are also giving to the survivors in our network. And so we have internal policies. We don't pay anyone under 80K. We pay everyone a living wage. We have not only paid sick and vacation leave. We have paid safe leave. If a survivor is not sick or on vacation and they're having to go to court or dealing with relocation or anything like that. We have emergency funding for any of the members on our team who may need it because they've been subjected to intimate partner violence or some form of violence. And so we're starting within, and then we are working in multiple different ways. So we have our systems change team, which is more of a traditional, or maybe not traditional, but more of what folks think of like policy advocacy. We work both on the state and federal level. We're partnering with banks and employers so they can better improve their internal policies. We have so much data and research from the survivors in our network, and we're putting out reports to really give numbers to what sort of survivors are being subjected to. And so, we know that course debt is a challenge and an issue that a lot of survivors are facing. Well, now we have some numbers on that. And we found that on average, survivors are being subjected to $16,000 of course debt in the main each year. We know that survivors, on average, this is within our network, about $1,300 is stolen from them each month. And so we're having numbers to these things where it can be a really strong leveraging point when we're doing our policy advocacy, when we're working with banks, when we're working with employers. And unfortunately, nationally, 1 in 2 women and 1 in 2 trans folks will be subjected to intimate partner violence in their lifetime. And so that means no matter what policy, no matter what service, no matter what program is happening, whether it's for survivors, intended for survivors or not, it will be impacting survivors. And so that means that we need everyone in our community to play a role in ending gender-based violence more broadly. And so for us, we have a report, so we are doing direct cash assistance, we're doing savings matching program, we have a peer-to-peer financial support group, and we're talking to banks, and we're talking to employers, and we're partnering with organizations across the nation to pass survivor wealth center legislation in their respective state, because we know that we have to come at this in so many different angles, and that if you are an employer, not only are your customers or your clients are survivors, but you are also employing survivors. So what does that mean for you? If you are a bank, not only are your clients are survivors, you are also employing survivors. And so we are trying to take this multifaceted approach because we know that one size does not fit all. But we want to make sure that we build this ecosystem of support so that no matter what situation a survivor is in, no matter what their need is, it's out there for them. And so I can share more about getting more into the nitty-gritty of our exact programs, but that's just sort of how we're envisioning it. And I think I've seen this huge shift, especially with more organizations talking about that intersection of economic abuse, financial security. I've seen it on the state level in terms of policy initiatives. I've seen, I've been tracking a handful of bills and found that there's like over 500 pieces of legislation across the nation. And it's been such a huge shift that we need to keep going.
Thank you, Sabrina.